Welcome to this week's episode of The Rutledge Perspective. And I am thrilled because this month, so it is November 2020, and I know they say you're not supposed to date your podcast, but I'm going to do it anyway because there's a purpose for that. It's November 2020, and this whole month of November, I saw that the other day too. This is the month to say no to stuff, is all about power. And so my guest today is going to be someone that you are going to really see what it means to step into your power, to own your power, to take advantage of your power, and to use your power to help yourself. And by helping yourself, you're helping everyone else. So I am excited to welcome Sherri McManus to the Rutledge Perspective. Sherri, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I love that we met. And it was just so awesome. So I'm so blessed that we got a chance to meet and connect, and so wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit about Sherri, and then as always, the notes or her full bio will be in the notes. So Sherri McManus is the Chief Operating Officer of Lou Everett Group, and she has a master's in organizational management and 19 years in management, training, teaching, and coaching. And she is skilled and seasoned experience with personal and professional development. And this is what I like. While she is originally from Hyde Park, New York, which is always cool, and currently resides in Willow Springs, North Carolina with her husband, who is Lou Everett of 14 years and two dogs. She also has two grown stepchildren, ages 23 and 21. But one of her passions is telling her personal and inspirational near-death story on the result of poor leadership in hopes of positively impacting the leadership landscape. And that is where we're going to go today, because that whole idea of power that is given to you because of position versus power that you earn because you're authentic and you're truly a leader, a dictator versus a leader, right? So why don't we start kind of like present day? So tell people a little bit about what you are doing at Lou Everett Group.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you so much. Yes. So my husband and I, we are the Lou Everett Group. We are certified executive leadership coaches and corporate trainers. So what we really focus on is leadership development and effective communication for small businesses. We love that space. We love to help to clear back the weeds from the, I don't care where, if you are the solo entrepreneur or corporate C-suite, but that business person, that the decision maker needs to clear back the weeds sometimes. And we are that we can help. So as the business owner can really be laser focused into their business to be successful.
I love that. And that's just such a beautiful space. And it's the same with my HR stuff, right? That leader, I'm like, I just don't want you to have to write that big check just because you didn't know, right? Let's just get that people stuff, together. It's not a necessary evil, right? It's really not rocket science. You can do this. So when you look at, what you guys are doing now and getting to that space, as we kind of back up through the journey, what brought you to here and said, we're going to do this and we're really going to help kind of these leaders get to that place where they're clearing away the weeds, as you said?
Absolutely. So what started it for me in particular was back in August 13th of 2020. I found myself in the hospital in the ICU in the burn center for 10 days. And we weren't sure if I was going to live or die. My poor husband, he has his side of his story, and I have my fuzziness, but I came down with a rare disease. It started out as a simple cold, then it kept progressing. And with the good doctors, they found out that I had a rare disease called MERM. And I didn't know what the heck that was. We had to do a crash course in it. And it's a derivative of Steven Johnson's syndrome. So with what I had, everything was attacking my good mucous membranes, and it was revolting. So I had burns from the inside out. Burns on my lips. My eyes were completely red, really bad cough, swelling in my throat. So like I said, I got to a point where the whole feeding tube came into play. It was pretty dire, and you don't know it until you're actually stepping away from it.
Right.
So, like I said, the good doctors, they were able to control some of the damage that was done. So I survived. And the interesting part of yes. It could have, I have minimal damage because of it, but it could have been so much worse. I mean, you're talking about death, blind, so many circumstances. So I had a newfound purpose. when I got out of that in 10 days by mine.
Mhm.
The doctors thought it would be 30 plus days.
Yeah.
I was determined. So the reason I share that story is because prior to this, I was in a work environment that was very high sales, very high pressure, which
Yeah.
most of my life that was okay. I've done
Right.
multiple things in my life. That wasn't the issue. But the issue is that a lot of my colleagues and my department, in my department, were getting sick constantly. And this is beyond the normal cold, but we couldn't figure out why. But it was a crash and burn situation. It was constantly go, go, go all the time. I mean, leadership at that time was so more focused at the bottom line than they were valuing their employees.
Yeah.
And it didn't start out that way. And or else I wouldn't have been in that field where I was doing for 1.5 to 2 years.
Right.
But being the rock star, doing great in what I was doing, and really, you know, I was just that A player that I'm going to do whatever I need to do. But here's the kicker. People don't need the unexpectations of working 70 plus hours a week and verbal abuse. That's what it boiled down to. And there's so many the more I share this story, there's more people that are similar. They're like, oh my gosh, my job has affected me in this way or that way. And it can tear families apart.
Absolutely.
And it's hard when you're in that to really sit back and be like, well, I'm going to just step away. Right. It's hard, you know, the money, or if you're the breadwinner, and I mean, I get it. But my husband and I, you know, after that dire situation, had that space, as we say, took a moment and be like, what are we doing? Yeah. And he was in, he was in the same organization. So that's how funny how we've been together in our own businesses since 2005. And we've gone in, this is our space, but we also have done other jobs too in the same field. He was in the executive C-suite level, dealing with me in the hospital and seeing this. Yes. And that was even more frustrating because thankfully he was able to do what he needed to do, and they gave him the space to take care of me. But it was really frustrating when I had to go back to work, even though the doctors told me, you know, I think you should work from home. Yeah. And me going to the actual president, because it was a very family-like family organization, and had great conversations. I'm like, yeah, you know, the doctor said I should really stay home for a little bit because my eyes have to get adjusted. And she looked at me and said, well, we just don't do that. Mind you, there's nothing written anywhere. There's nothing written anywhere that says that. And I'm like, okay, but I have a doctor's note. Like, yeah. So it was just, you know, it's really fascinating. So I knew, you know, even prior going back into the fire as I did, I was like, you know what? I'm like, there you go. Of course. Yeah. Yes. That's all right. That, you know, leadership is not positional. Right. And it's influence, nothing more, nothing less. Yes. And I took that space and I was able to actually do a deeper dive in personal development. And, you know, I fell into that trap, which I think a lot of people do as well, where, well, I'm just going to assume that I'm just going to grow and have the assumption gap, right? We grow up as little kids and everything just kind of grows and you just grow automatically. But then you get to a point you realize going, oh, no. You actually need to, you get to a point and you can go so far, but you still need to actually start doing some work now. Right. Okay, what books should I read? What should I invest in? What should and it doesn't have to be money oriented. I mean, come on, there's so many podcasts and things for free. Oh, just listen. But here's the kicker. You need to apply. Yeah. Not the shelf help book, right? Right. It's sitting on a shelf. So I had to really deep dive it and to really enjoy that because I knew I always needed that. And I was like, yeah, I should, because I was in leadership roles before. And I was like, yeah, I actually do that. But I never had the time. I never had that space to do it. Right. So God gave me an opportunity, said, well, here you go. Here you go. And I was like, okay. Yeah. And it's a blessing. It really
Yeah.
is. And I thank God, and it's gotten me even closer with that,
Yeah.
that experience. And it
Yeah.
brought my husband and
Yeah.
I, even we've been in dire situations before, but nothing
Yeah.
as dire as this.
Yeah.
So we can look back and be very grateful, and every
Mm-hmm.
day be grateful,
Yes.
every morning and every night. And now
Absolutely.
it's really understanding of how to give value to others. I kind of always did,
Right.
but this is a little different. This is like, oh,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I
okay.
think what you said, is really important when you think about that leader,
Mhm.
right? That leader who said, yeah, we don't do that here. For my small businesses with HR, technically you're right. You don't have to accommodate anything. She was absolutely right, right?
Mhm.
You do not have to make an accommodation that creates an undue hardship for the business. That's a technical piece.
Mm.
But the other piece that people don't think about is your response to situations like that is indicative of your culture as
Mhm.
well as your leadership.
Right.
And so when you think back on that situation with her and you're just coming out of the hospital, you're coming out of a truly near
Yeah.
death experience,
All right.
and you're looking at a leader who's like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
this is how we do it. And if you can't do that, then you're no longer an A player. I think it's really important for when we talk about power, you're really stepping back and being able to sit in that power and say, but this is not okay. And I actually am more important than this. And there's positional leadership,
Right.
but positional leadership without respect, positional leadership out of fear is actually dictatorship, not leadership.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so talk a little bit about tell people how you went through that process of actually saying, yeah, this is not
Mm.
okay. And because it's not okay, I'm actually going to make a decision to
Yes.
do something different and stand in my power to do something different. Maybe take people through your thought process there.
Yeah. So I knew right from there, I'm like, okay, because of that toxic environment and what it turned
Mm-hmm.
into, I had a team at that point, and I had a team
Ah.
of about 5 individuals. And I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
am no way going to put my team through what I went through or even about
Right.
to go through. Now, granted,
Mm-hmm.
the culture was actually getting, pretty antsy,
Mm-hmm.
and that again, in that toxic environment.
Yeah.
And my immediate manager, she knew it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was from the higher ups. They're like, well, do what you
Right.
need to do because this is what we need to do. And I don't care what
Yeah.
you have to do. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not, excuse me, I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
be the jerk manager. And I
Right.
stood up, and all my other managers were like, oh crap.
Uh-oh.
You
Right.
know? But then they went back, but then they said to me, they're like, oh man, I'm so glad that you said that because I was thinking the same
Right.
thing. And I'm like, well, why don't you
Yes.
stand up?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they can't do anything. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
worst case, that can fire you. But if you do it in a respectful manner, they
Exactly.
can't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we had it
Mm-hmm.
out, and I'll never forget that
Yeah.
moment. And I took my power
Yeah.
back, and I'm like, no. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, what? I was like,
Yeah.
no, you're not
Yeah.
seeing the ramifications of what you're doing to them.
Right.
And I
Right.
refuse to have that happen. I go, give me time with my team. Give me the
Mm-hmm.
moment so I can actually mold them a little bit so we can,
Yeah.
because each one's a little different. You can't just
Right.
blanket everybody to be hoorah. The other one needs it between the
Mm-hmm.
eyes. The other one needs a little
Right.
like hands off, the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the style was one way. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that doesn't work for everybody. And they kept pushing the
Yes.
blame. Oh, well, it's their fault. I go, no, it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's our
No.
responsibility to power and to be
Yes.
leaders in the
Yeah.
proper way to find out what ticks. It's more like it's a responsibility. When you're in a leadership role,
Yes.
it's a huge responsibility. And you don't know that
Absolutely.
until you actually have to go through it. Now, there's bosses right on that need to be that, like, hey, you
Yeah.
need to do this. But if
Mm-hmm.
you truly want to be a leader, and I think this is the best way to explain anybody that's listening to this,
Mm-hmm.
man, that's a responsibility.
Yes.
And it's a big platform that you can use your smarts for evil or use it for the
Yes.
greater good.
Yes.
And it will,
Yes.
it's the long game, not the short game. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's company, which is still in existence, still doing what they're doing in
Mm.
high turnover rate, but it blames everybody else.
Yeah.
And I've been to other organizations like this,
Oh
but not
yeah.
as bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's the short-term result. The
Yeah.
long term is when you got to mold that a little bit. You got to do some finessing.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and that's what I did. I was like, give me time. Because they were like, well, what do you
Mm-hmm.
want then? I was like, I need you to back off so I
Right.
can take care of my team team and,
Yes,
and let's see
that's
what
what I
happens.
need. Yes,
That's what I
exactly.
need.
Yeah. Well, and
they,
standing in that, yeah, saying
yeah.
it. Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
did. And you know how long they gave me? You know how long they gave me for that?
Oh,
Less than a week.
oh, yikes.
Yeah, less than
Yeah,
a week. And I saw little improvements for each one. And they were
yeah.
happier. I made sure that they
Hmm.
were praised. I made sure that I loved
Right.
them to death. I go, you know what? This is what's happening. I go, but I
Hmm.
shielded them. I was like,
Hmm.
listen, I go, they're not happy with our results. We have this. How can we work as a team? What do we need to
Right.
do? What do we need to do? Kind of caress
Hmm.
them a little bit, mold them
Right.
into it. And then, I could do certain things, being there, saw little tweaks. I'm like, awesome, awesome. But then the
Yes.
end of the month came and was like, come on, where it is, where it is. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
Right.
and
Exactly.
had to revert back to,
Hmm.
that ugly style. And
Yeah.
I was so transparent. I was probably a little too transparent with my
Yeah.
team,
Hmm.
but I needed to say what I had to say because it was my platform, my team,
Right.
and I want to make sure that they were not going to be sick, even though
Right.
that they are. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times when people came to me in tears because of the
Yeah.
circumstances.
Right.
And
And
if
that's not okay.
no, it's not. If half your day is consoling people on your
Right.
team,
Right.
that
Something's
is an
wrong.
issue. Something is
Something's
wrong.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and like you said, when you're looking at some of those toxic environments and someone who gives you a week to fix something like that, that's not real commitment. That is not, yeah, we're going to give you a chance. That is,
Yeah.
I just want to give you enough so you can't say that I didn't let you try. But it's not real commitment. And it's that idea of managing uniformly. You can't manage people uniformly
Right.
because people aren't uniform.
Right.
You can manage consistently. And that's, I've been in organizations. In fact, my last organization, it's very difficult for leaders, especially in family owned businesses and businesses that have been around a very, very long time,
Yeah.
that it's pure inertia that keeps them going well, right?
Right.
It's not really
Yeah.
innovation. It's not really, it's just inertia.
Yeah.
And if they really got focused on doing things the right way, they could just explode exponentially.
Right.
But they're just, they're
Yeah.
mired in the way they used to do it. And
Right.
so I look at some of those organizations, like it's not treating people consistently
Mm-hmm.
does not equal treating people the same.
Right.
So if you want to reward someone and you guys give coats and you guys give dinner out, who cares? You're rewarding people. The consistency is that you're rewarding people. If you were just saying everybody only gets a dinner or everybody gets a jacket or everybody gets a shirt or everybody gets nobody cares about that.
Yeah.
And if you have people who are now saying, well, how come they got a jacket and how come we got that tells you about your culture.
Right.
Because the reality is you're rewarding people for jobs well done. And it's about acknowledging that, right? It's about acknowledging and being a leader and supporting people with the behavior that you want. And if there is focused on the what and the same, and it's not fair, and how come they, and why come I didn't, that tells you you've got a cultural challenge. And so how did you now, so now you've gone through, you've had this revelation, you're trying to make it different, right? You're seeing these little glimmers of light, and then it comes crashing down.
Yeah.
How did you say, you know what? We tried, it's not going to work. I'm just going to step out on faith and we're going to have to make a change. What was that tipping point for you?
The tipping point for me was the fact that whenever I was walking to my job or even in the parking lot coming in, I was getting short of breath. So even though mentally I was strong and just pushing through, but still being cautious, still like, hey, I'm not going to get myself all wound up. I'm just going to be like, okay, I'm just going to take things in. But then it started to slip. And I felt my breathing, it was like almost like a panic attack, but I've never had a panic attack, but it was just this weird breathing. So I thought it was because of what happened to me. That's what I thought. And I went through a pulmonologist and went to, with everything. And my husband noticed, he goes, you only get worked up even the night before you have to go into work.
Yes.
I'm like, he noticed it. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think, because I was thinking about work and what it has to do and what I got to do.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And then your body, it's the body's reaction. So that was one moment. that I'm like, I really had to step away and be like, I can't breathe. Like I'm literally breathing through a straw, and I've never had that happen. And I was like, it's gotta be the connection here.
Yes.
And I had to, then my husband, I had to think, I'm like, okay, it's your job that is causing, even my pulmonologist was just like, yeah, it sounds like your job.
Yeah, that's stress
like that stress
right?
thing. Yeah, I'm like, it's pretty hardcore. And we're like, so it was the seed that planted it. And I was just like, okay. I was like, all right. And then I did one step further. I actually took my manager, and I gave him a month, just because of the cycle and the way that the industry was. I was like, well, you know what, I'm gonna do what's right and finish out the month or something. And I said, and they're like, well, why? I was just like, let's get HR involved, because it was every time I had a meeting, it wasn't on the same playing field.
Right.
It just turned into a defensiveness. And I didn't want to say anything inappropriate, and I wanted to be factual. And then my other manager stepped in, and I'm just like, wait, now it's 2 against 1.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. No.
So my best advice that was given to me was like, is to bring it as that mediator for HR. I was just like, fantastic. I go, I will give you every reason in the book. I go, my true reason, and let's bring HR. And they're like, okay. I mean, this took a couple of days. So they were like shaking. They're like, oh my God, what's going on? Right. And it just kind of like it really gave, again, a sense that empowerment to myself.
Yes.
Like I already went through the crying. I already went through that. And then the realization, and just be like, okay, let's write everything down, but take the emotions out of it. And I don't know what came over me, but to be objective and factual as possible. Because at first it's going to be a turmoil of the emotions.
Absolutely.
But something came over, and I wrote everything that was like, okay, these are the reasons why I'm out. And then I wrote them, and I talked to HR and everything. So we're in the room, and it literally was like 2 pages of stuff that was like, this is ridiculous.
Yes.
And it was probably it was supposed to be maybe an hour meeting or so. No, it was like 2.5 hour meeting.
Yeah.
It was so impactful. And and thank God that, HR was there, because I called it, and I was just like, watch, this was going to happen when I say this. And I'm like, and then like, finally she picked it up, and she's like, okay, all right, time out. All right.
Yes.
So I felt so empowered, to be honest, in that space. The second time I felt empowered, to not in a mean way. And I loved my manager immensely. She's such a good worker. It's just unfortunate it's not her, it's powers to be, and it's that dictatorship. And I felt sorry. I felt sorry for her, because she didn't make a change in that. And I was like, God, you're so much better than this place. I'm like, you don't even see it. I'm like, you're so much better. And that was heartbreaking. But, I can't change that, but I can change me.
Absolutely.
And I didn't want my team to go through this. And I'm like, no. So because of what I did, and being objective, and being factual, and saying, everything like that. And it was funny, because I think during that week I was seeing a lot of Shark Tank. So I said all these things, and I said, and for these reasons, I'm out. Right.
That's great.
Deep down, I was like,
that's great. Yeah. But that's the thing. And I tell people all the time, I want you to continue to lead with your heart, but I need you to act with your head. Right. And we, especially as women, have a tendency to be really emotional. And you can be passionate about something, but when you are emotional, you aren't heard as clearly. Yeah. And you don't make as clear a decision. And so you need to take that emotion and channel it into action. Still be passionate, but really be clear. And so if you can do that, then even if you decide, you know what, I've got to go, but I can't go right now, you can at least, because now you're out of your emotion, right? You are still passionate about it. You still feel it, but you're channeling it into action. You can then put together a plan, and you can tolerate more, because you see the end game, right? You can have these end of position, because I won't say end of career by any means, end of position conversations that are very pointed, very clear, very calm, right? Not ugly, not nasty, not combative, because you are in a place of calm, right? You've really come to that point where it's like, no, this is just what needs to happen, and this is why. And you asked, and I'm going to speak truth to power about the reasons why. And you can do something with it or you cannot, but I'm telling you what's going to happen if you don't.
Right.
And then the decision is up to you, because we all have freedom to make a choice. We are not free from the consequences of our choices, right? Intended and unintended. So you've gone through, now you've said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. You've gotten HR, which is a really good idea, especially if you think it's going to be combative as you're leaving. Definitely need to have that advocate in there with you. When you look back over all of this, you know, I was doing this, I was really good, type A, right? Type A, insecure overachiever, raise your hand, right? And so you're doing great work and you're really good at what you do. And you're working all these crazy hours, which at the beginning of our careers, we do that, right? We just do that. You're learning a lot, you're gaining a lot, but there reaches a point where you need to have more work-life integration. And some want that more earlier than others, right? But there's a point where you just have to decide what's more important for you. But as you look at all of that, Sherri, what would you tell somebody along that journey? What was the biggest surprise for you as you look at all of that kind of movement?
The surprise for that was that, you know, it comes a sense of calm, like you're talking about, and the strength that I knew had strength, but I didn't know how much until you're put in that predicament and standing up. Now I'm a Taurus, so I'm a bull anyway. So I'm like, you know, ready to go. And my emotions can sometimes get the best of me. However, I had the awareness knowing that, like, okay, take the emotions out of it and let's be factual, because I'm a disruptor. I mean, any type of DISC assessment or strength finder, I mean, I'm a disruptor. So I'm going to take a stand, especially for the greater good. And I felt that I didn't get the sense that anybody else, even though they wanted it but they were too afraid. And I just had enough. I just had enough at that point. And I'm like, why? What's going to happen? Right? Like, you just like throw my hands up. I'm like, what are you going to do? Fire me? I'm like, just because I'm being vocal? I'm like, okay, fine. Right. Yeah. So it's just, I think the inner strength to find, to be like, gosh, I don't know. I don't, just when you're on that brink of like, I don't know if I can give any more, or I don't know. There's always a little bit more. And I think that was probably the most pleasantly surprising, that I'm glad that I stood my ground. And I fought, that I really felt that this was the right space, right thing. It wasn't just like, well, I could be wrong. No, I was not without a doubt in the right in this circumstances.
I love it. I love it. And then with that surprise, then what would you tell everyone who's listening, the key piece of guidance for them if they're in this position where they're like, this just is either impacting my health? I've been there, didn't sleep on a Sunday for 5 years, right? It's impacting my health, or it just doesn't feel right, or I've got to say something, right? I've got to figure out how to stand up because it's impacting my team or it's impacting me. What is the one really significant piece of guidance, or two pieces of guidance, that you would give someone who's in that position?
Yeah. And there's many women that come to me and they say this, to like, but I'm the breadwinner. And I have children. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, you have to think for yourself, obviously. And you got to think, I'm like, but is your health worth it? Like, it's a temporary situation to take a little bit of a cutback, put some sacrifices in. I'm sure there's so many subscription models and TV that we could cut out for a temporary. It's a temporary situation. If you look at it as a temporary, it's not permanent, that things will be better. Because what happens is that people can end in what I have, in a death situation. People have gone, PTSD, and they've got some serious damages. I mean, I walked away with some damages, but I mean, thankfully,
Right.
I don't have any type of like mental health, which,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of folks, they do. They got
Yes.
PTSD. They have some really serious things that
Mm-hmm.
they have to work through.
Right. Right.
And, it just, wow, it's just, it's amazing that you really have to do a deep dive on yourself
Mm-hmm.
and be like, well,
Yeah.
where am I? Where do I need to
Mm-hmm.
be? What needs to happen? There's people that
Yeah.
I still are there to this day and being in that
Mm-hmm.
environment, and bless their
Mm-hmm.
heart. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
because the money and the circumstances just outweighed, like, well, I'll just
Yeah.
deal with it, right? I'll just deal
Right.
with it.
Right.
But yeah, for me, it just was not worth it at that point. And it took
Mm-hmm.
like a year and a half to 2 years off my life in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
was so inundated
Yeah.
into that environment for
Yeah.
so long that you just get numb and it just keeps going,
Yes.
that like I was losing out on life. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
volunteer like I do now. I couldn't give back. I couldn't even pick up a
Right.
book to read something so I
Yeah.
can fill my cup up. Like that was just,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do it. I just
Yeah.
didn't have that
Yeah.
space to do that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
never again. I'm not
Yeah.
doing that.
I
Um,
love that. I
so
love that. It's honoring ourselves and stepping into that power, right? And we as women, we have a tendency not to do that. But if we
yeah,
can honor ourselves and make a plan, right?
yeah,
Unless you're in
right,
danger. If you're in danger, you need to get
right,
out.
right,
But if you're not in danger, at least give yourself the grace to make a plan.
right.
Just
Yes,
don't hurt you because you're mad at them, right?
right.
But make a plan, because
Yeah,
you always have a choice. Companies will make you think you don't. They'll make you think, and they call them golden handcuffs for a reason, right? They'll keep paying you more and more and more
yeah,
because you feel like you can't leave because the money's so good.
right,
How much is that money worth? Is it worth 5 years of your life? Is it
right,
worth not seeing, your kids, or not getting a
right,
dog, or not going on that trip?
right,
What is it worth? And only you can answer that question, right?
right.
Only you can answer that question. So, Sherri,
Absolutely.
this has been so insightful and so amazing. And I am so grateful for this time. Thank you to Michelle, who introduced us
Yes.
all about the network, which is so
Yeah.
awesome. So thank you so much for being here and for giving some of your time to us. If you have been listening and getting her story, I wish you the opportunity to stand in your power. I wish you the opportunity to really take control and know that you do have choice and you do have power, and you don't have to enable someone else in their treatment of you that is unacceptable. So, Sherri, hopefully we can do it again.
Yes, definitely.
That would
Yeah.
be
So
awesome.
much. Yes.
Yeah. And we will, for those of you watching or listening, watching the video or listening to the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. Definitely give us a like, give us a review. Let us know what else you'd like to hear. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next time.
Okay.
Bye. You've been watching The Rutledge Perspective. Thank you for tuning in. If we have given you a different perspective, or if you've learned something new that you hadn't thought about before, please subscribe to the Rutledge Perspective podcast where you get your favorite podcasts, and give us a like on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher. We really appreciate it. And your feedback is important as well, as we use that to inform our next episodes. You can also head over to my website, laurelrutledge.com, and download a freebie called Where's My Mojo that can really help you get out of your rut, or maybe talk you back off that ledge of frustration. You can also find previous episodes of The Rutledge Perspective on laurelrutledge.com. I really appreciate your tuning in. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.